it is not a time or place to tout anyone's accomplishments. However, the Rebbe once shared that the nature of an MC is to think to himself, oh, I can outdo the speaker. He is not content with merely serving as MC. Tonight, however, this is certainly not the case. Rabbi Jacobson is a gifted speaker and globally recognized for his erudition, scholarship, and expert delivery of the richness of Chassidus. I personally remember Rabbi Jacobson when he was known merely as Yossi. After hours long of Shabbos Farbrengens, where he was immersed in the Rebbe's teachings, he emerged with loads of information that the Rebbe shared. He would often serve as a source of review and refresh for so many who could not remember all the intricate details of the Rebbe's words. Without any further ado, Rabbi Yossi Jacobson. Waiters, please stop bussing. We'll serve dessert after them. L'chaim. No, I'm loving Garti. I'm loving Garti, Rabbi Warner. Loving. I'm loving Garti. Loving means white. Gut Yom Tov, Gut Yom Tov, L'chaim v'levracha to one and all. And as it's customary by Chassidim to wish each other on Yud Tes Kislev, L'shana Tova, B'limud HaChassidus, U'bedarkei HaChassidus, Tikasevu v'sichasemu, may you and all of us be inscribed and sealed for a good and beautiful and awesome year in the learning of Chassidus and in internalizing Chassidus in our lives. L'chaim, l'chaim, v'livracha. As it happens to be, this Yud Tes Kislev gives us a little foretaste, just a little foretaste of what Yud Tes Kislev will be when Mashiach comes, because this Yud Tes Kislev, the whole America is celebrating as a holiday. In every American home, there is a festive dinner tonight of thanksgiving, of gratitude, of expression of joy. In fact, Rabbi Werner expressed to me that there would have been more people if not for Thanksgiving. But no, they're also celebrating. It's just they're not clearly certain yet of the exact nature of the celebration, but Yud Tes Kislev is being celebrated in our entire country, as we are here tonight to give thanksgiving of Ashreinu, Ma Tov Chelkeinu, Uma Noyim Geiraleinu, Uma Yafa Yerushaseinu, for the great Yom Tov, for the great holiday of Yud Tes Kislev, and for what this holiday represents for each and every one, consciously or even more unconsciously, to be connected, to internalize the awesome light that was brought down through the Baal Shem Tov and through his students, through the Mezritcha Magid, whose yahrzeit is on Yud Tes Kislev, and of course through the Alter Rebbe, whose Chag HaGeula, Liberation Day, is on Yud Tes Kislev. They tell the story about an Indian tribe which lost its chief, and it needed a new leader. So they put in a classified ad, and a Jewish boy who needed a job. Was lacht man schein?
It was set tonight. Okay. Kivan shehigid shuv eina chayzer magid. Which means once you hear a speaker once, you don't invite him again. Eina chayzer magid. But the same is true with a joke. They say that a joke you can repeat twice a year in a speech, and a story you can repeat once a year, and a Dvar Torah you could repeat twice in the same sermon. So a Jewish kid applied to the job. He had a dark complexion, so he can be mistaken as an Indian chief. They asked him, do you have the credentials? He asked, what are the credentials? They said you have to be able to look at the stars and predict the coming winter, how cold it will be. The Jewish boy says, no problem. He looks up at the stars. He thinks to himself, oy va'avoy, I don't know how to read stars. So he tells the Indians, he says, I see in the stars it's going to be somewhat cold. The word somewhat is not milchiks, it's not fleshik. Somewhat could mean anything. But he was curious, so he sneaked out of the town. In the middle of the night, he went to a nearby town. He took a quarter and he put it into a public phone. You remember public phones? Aleim Hashalom. He called up the Washington Weather Bureau and he asks them about the coming winter. They say it's going to be cold. So he goes back to the Indians. He says, I looked up at the stars again. I see it's going to be cold. Chief changed from somewhat cold to cold. It's going to be cold. They start collecting lots of lumber to warm their bones in a chilly winter. A week later, he sneaks out again, calls up the Weather Bureau in Washington. Nu, what's your prediction for the winter? And the man tells him it's going to be a very cold winter. He goes back to the Indians. He reports what he's seeing now in the stars. They start frantically assembling lumber for what's going to be a very cold winter. The next week he sneaks out again and calls Washington. They tell him it's going to be an excruciatingly cold winter. He goes back to the Indians and he gives over the new report from the stars. They become frantic. 20 hours a day, men, women, and children are collecting wood for this excruciatingly pending winter. The next week he goes out, and when he calls the bureau, the man tells him it's going to be the coldest winter in the history of the U.S. I think that you're calling the Weather Bureau. Send them my regards. It's going to be the coldest winter in the U.S. history. The poor Yiddish boy is dumbfounded and annoyed. He turns to the guy and he says, the Machsmer Meshuggah, you're driving me mad. Why can't you make up your mind? First you tell me cold, then very cold, then excruciatingly cold. Now it's the coldest winter that ever was. What is going on here? And the man tells him, he says, listen, young man, I really don't know who you are, but I'll be very blunt with you. Do you think we here in Washington know anything about the weather? We know nothing about the coming winter, trust me. All we know is that this year, the Indians are collecting wood like crazy. This, of course, captures a phenomenon in which one never realizes how instrumental he or she is in actually creating the outcome of events, not realizing that it's he himself or she herself who has that power. When we want to stand back and reflect, verbring, inspire ourselves as to what the Baal Shem Tov, to what the Alter Rebbe and their disciples taught the Jewish world through Torah's HaChassidus, to the teachings of Chassidus. One of the first ideas that comes to mind is the power, the potential that a human being, that a Jew possesses. Chassidus, in many ways, is a commentary on Yaakov's dream. Vayachaloim v'hinei sulam mutzav arza v'roishe magia hashamayma. Yaakov dreams of a ladder that's etched on the ground, but its head, its top, reaches the heavens. The ability to look at a person as a sulam, as a ladder which is mutzav arza, which is etched on the ground and in the earth. And yet, v'roishe magia hashamayma, he or she is capable of touching heaven in a very real way without compromising or denying the fact that he or she is a sulam mutzav arza, a ladder that is simultaneously etched on the earth. This was one of the first and great revolutions of Chassidism in general, and particularly Chassidus Chabad in the teachings of the Alter Rebbe. Somebody once asked an interesting question. If you ever studied the Tanya, I had the privilege of, I'll be honest with you, since I grew up in Lubavitch and Chabad, as our dear MC testified in his lovely and short eulogy. So we learned Tanya in yeshiva. But when I was asked later as an adult to start teaching Tanya, actually in Borough Park, I realized that I first had to unlearn what I learned in order to start learning it a second time. Because often we can learn concepts and know the words, but really not get it. And as a youngster, it was sometimes taught, I don't like saying it, but it was taught in a very boring and monotonous way, so that I was a little bit allergic to it. So when I wanted to teach it, I had to forget what I learned the first time and literally learn it anew. And I had the privilege of teaching it for 6 years, the first section of Tanya. We had a class in Borough Park in Heichel Menachem every Sunday and then Tuesday, which developed in a series called The Tale of Two Souls. And there was one man who came there the first or second class, or the third class, and he got up in the middle and he said, Rabbi Jacobson, I'm an old man, and the way you're teaching Tanya, I'm not going to be alive by the time you finish. So do me a favor, speed up the process so I could celebrate the end of the Tanya. And he told everybody how old he is and how much longer he's going to live. I took his words to heart, and instead of 15 years, it took 6 years. And at the Siyum of Tanya, 6 years later, he was there. He was there and he spoke. There was one man who would come every single week and sit against me at the other side of the table on the only other comfortable chair in the room. There were 2 comfortable chairs in the room, one for me, one for him. And the moment I would open my mouth, he would fall asleep. And not just fall asleep, he would have a geschmack asleep. He would snore to the point that at sometimes I would stop in the middle of the class. And some of you I know have followed the series and you hear I pause. It's not my fault. Somebody was snoring very loud. It's just the mic didn't pick it up. But every single week at the end of the class he would approach me and he would say, Rabbi Jacobson, today you were outstanding. So I would nod and say thank you. But once I lost my patience. I plotzed. I say, my holy tired Yid, can you explain to me something? It's been now 6 years. You sleep at every single class. You snore. You don't wake up till I finish. Why do you keep on telling me every week today was outstanding? He says, you don't understand. When I'm complimenting you, it's not your class that I'm complimenting. I'm complimenting the dreams that I had while you were teaching. And I want to tell you the dreams I have during your class of Tanya are so beautiful. They're so pleasant. They're just outstanding and incredible. And for this, I thank you very much. It taught me, of course, a lot of things. One of the things it taught me, you don't know how you impact people. Sometimes a rabbi gets insulted when people fall asleep during the speech. I know in this shul it never happens with such a fine and edel community. But the place where I come from, which is called New York, there's a minhag to fall asleep during the Rav's drasha, and sometimes before and sometimes after. And some rabbis get very insulted. And in fact, there was a shul where there was one man, the president, who would sit on top, and he would every Shabbos fall asleep when the rabbi opened his mouth. And the rabbi was upset, but he couldn't do anything because this was the president. The shamish, the gabbai actually, who usually hates both the rabbi and the president, sees the opportunity and tells the Rav, he says, this president is a chutzpinyak. When you speak, he snores. Give me permission to take on kavod ha-Torah, respect for the Torah. And next Shabbos, when he sleeps, I'm going to take a bat and knock him over his head and teach him a lesson. And the Rav says that's a beautiful thing to do. It's a great mitzvah. It's wonderful. You have my rishus, and go ahead. Next Shabbos comes, the rabbi opens his mouth, the president starts snoring. The gabbai is prepared. He had a wooden bat in the bima stored away already a few days before Shabbos. Kashitas Beishamai. And he takes out the bat and he goes over to the president and he knocks him over his head. And the president opens his eyes, looks up, tells the gabbai, do it again. The gabbai says, why? He says, I could still hear the Rav. So we often get insulted when people don't respond to us the way we like them to respond to us. But often you don't know the impact that you have on people. You often don't know. Now, she doesn't like what I'm saying. So someone asked an interesting question. And it makes one think. I don't know how many of you are familiar or intimately familiar with the different Chassidic works that there are, of the different students of the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid of Mezrich, and the other great masters in the generations afterwards. But there is a notable distinction between the Tanya and many of the other Chassidic works. Many distinctions, but one distinction I want to address. The other Chassidic works are extremely heartwarming. They discuss a phenomenon of a Jew who suffers, let's say, doubts or depression or gets into bad moods or feels apathetic, cold, dry, empty, frozen, indifferent. Natural moods and emotions that take us over. And when you open up some of the Hasidic works of these great masters, the message in one language or another is, God is with you right there in your lowly moods. He's there with you in your melancholy, in your dejection, even in your depression. God is there with you not only in your perfection, but in your flaws and in your imperfections. And you feel good, or you feel a little better. They somehow romanticize the inherent flaws and downfalls of the human person, of the human condition. In the Tanya, probably you will not find more than once an expression of empathy. One time in the whole Tanya, in chapter 30, the Alter Rebbe admits, V'hine be'emes shehi milchama g'dola v'atzuma. The truth is, it is hard to be a Jew. Only once. Every other chapter, you could. And he has a solution for everything. You come to the Alter Rebbe and you say, I have timtum halev. My heart is plugged. I feel nothing. They once asked a Jew, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? And he said, I don't know and I don't care. You come to the Alter Rebbe and you say, I don't care. I have timtum halev. Perek Chavtes, what does he tell you? He gives you a solution. He says, you have a problem. The problem is you're arrogant. The problem is that the log is too thick, and therefore the fire does not catch on the log. You have to take the log and splinter it to small pieces, and the fire will catch, and you'll be able to cook your turkey. That he doesn't say in Tanya. That's the American Yud Tes Kislev edition. Right away a solution. A person has sveikus and amun, a person has doubts and faith. Again, the end of chapter 29. And the Alter Rebbe says, your animal soul has become a little inflated, and its chutzpah is expressing itself, and you have to beat it up a little bit. You have to scream at yourself a little bit. And he gives us the exact adjectives we should tell ourselves. A person feels down from the struggles they have in life, chapter 27. And the Alter Rebbe says immediately he has a solution. Acknowledge that this is part of your mission, this is part of your destiny, and you may be judging yourself in a superior fashion. You may have a misplaced sense of who you are and of your identity, and so on and so forth. I don't feel love, here is the way to feel love. I don't feel awe, here is the way to feel awe. I'm not happy, here is the solution. So someone asked a question. Why doesn't he show more empathy? Why doesn't he keep on saying, as some of his own colleagues kept on saying, God loves you, you're awesome, you're great the way you are in your downness. Hashem is there. Yes, sometimes you'll find it, but the emphasis in the Tanya, especially in the Tanya, even more than other works, is, yes, you can. And somebody said, it's disheartening for me. I need something else. But the truth is, the question is an interesting one, but he was missing the point that the love expressed in the Tanya is extraordinary. A child comes home from school and says, Ma, I hate school. It ever happens in Detroit? Probably not, but again, in New York, where I come from, it happens sometimes. I hate school. Right, you know about this mother who comes into her son's bedroom. David, it's 9 o'clock in the morning, get out of bed, you have to go to school. He says, Mommy, I don't want to go to school. She says, why, David? And he says, Mommy, all the teachers hate my guts, and all the children hate my guts. Why should I go to school? And she says, I'll also give you 2 reasons why you should go. Number 1, you're 49 years old. Number 2, you're the principal of the school. The child comes home and says, Mommy, Tati, I really don't like my teacher. I don't like the school. I don't like the curriculum. It's boring. I don't understand a word. I'm failing in Chumash. I'm failing in Mishnayos. I'm failing in math. I'm failing in English. I'm failing in algebra. I'm failing. So mom turns to her child and says, Yasala, I know that school is not for you. I know that you're incapable of learning Chumash, Mishnayos, Gemara, English, math, science, algebra. I know you're inept, but you know what? I still love you. And I love you unconditionally. And I will always love you. And come and let me give you a hug because you are mine for eternity, and it really doesn't matter. Now, I think that's a beautiful, beautiful reaction. But there's another mother who hears the same words of her child and says, my son, no, you're underestimating yourself. You are capable of achieving great things in life. But perhaps we have to make some changes. Maybe not this subject as well as another subject. Maybe not this school as well as another school. Maybe not this environment as well as another environment. Maybe this method is not very effective with you. Maybe this approach cannot take root with you. But let's figure out your path, and let's figure out how you will achieve tremendous heights because your potential is far greater. My love to you is unconditional. But because my love to you is unconditional, I also respect how great you can become. The Alter Rebbe believed in people too much just to say, you're uninspired, we love you. We love you. But you're not a Nebuch case. You're a Sulam Mutzav Arza. You're a ladder that's etched on the ground. But v'roishoy magia hashamayimo. You, in your artzius, you in your earthiness can touch the heavens. You! Which generated another major distinction between the Alter Rebbe and some of his colleagues. The Alter Rebbe had a Chassid who was a follower and disciple of his. The Alter Rebbe also had a colleague, a friend, a man named Reb Chaikel. He came from a city called Amdur, A-M-D-U-R, not Admur, but Amdur. They called him Reb Chaikel Amdurer, Reb Chaikel of Amdur. He was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, hence a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, and a great master. And he also had a pupil, a Chassid. And both of these Chassidim, the Chassid of the Alter Rebbe and the Chassid of Reb Chaikel, were neighbors, and they davened together in the same shul. And one day the Alter Rebbe's Chassid came to his Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, and he began to lament. And listen to what he was lamenting about. He said, we both go to the same shul each morning to daven Shachris. I look at Reb Chaikel's Chassid, he comes in pumped up. If you go in, even till today, especially then, to Shtiblach, to shuls of different Chassidic groups and sects, you'll see people come in often. From the mikveh, the payas are still wet and shaking and swaying, pumped up, davening loud with a chayis, with a vitality, with an inspiration, with a passion. And he says, and this guy just never has a setback. He's always inspired. He's always on fire. He says, I'm your chassid. I come to shul. And immediately I'm struggling. I'm not in the mood. I don't understand. I don't appreciate. I start learning Chassidus. And ideas are not entering into me. And for me to light some fire, to kindle some spark, takes me an hour and a half. I miss the minyan. And I end up, onaylam haza, onaylam haba. Not I had the minyan, not I feel successful, not I feel spiritual. Why is it? He says, my friend Brent, he's on fire. And I'm cold and dry. Now imagine you're a Rebbe and your Chassid tells this to you. And the Alter Rebbe had sich verdweket. He meditated for a few minutes. He placed his holy hand on his forehead and he meditated. And when he lifted his head, he looked at his Chassid and he said, and I'm going to say it in the Alter Rebbe's words and then translate. Brennt, Chaikel brennt in em, und mir willen, as me soll allein brennen. Paraphrasing or continuing the phrase of that Chassid, this man is burning and I'm dead, I'm dry, I'm cold. So the Alter Rebbe says, he's burning. Chaikel is burning in him. And we want that one should burn on their own. The Alter Rebbe, not only did he believe in people's potential, he withdrew based on the idea that you, within your own character and within your own identity, can become a beacon of light, of depth, of inspiration, and of holiness. And he would not back off of respecting the truth that one can internalize Chassidus. In other words, one can internalize godliness not only by surrendering their individuality to a Reb Chaikel, and therefore having this continuous flame that comes from an overwhelming inspiration when you're connected to a tzaddik, but rather having the ability to go and find your own spark within your own flame, within your own soul, within your own psyche. In Bnei Brak, there's a Jew. He's a very popular teacher and speaker today. He's known as the Tolner Rebbe. The Tolner Rebbe spoke a few months ago in Bnei Brak, and he's very anecdotal in his presentations. He has lots of stories and humorous. And he turned to the crowd and he said, "What's the difference between Breslov and Lubavitch?" He said, "Today, what's the difference between Breslov and Chabad?" And the Talmud said, "I'll tell you the difference. Reb Nachman of Breslov wanted that Breslov and Chassidism should have long payas, long sidelocks. And he said, why? That if they end up one day in hell, Reb Nachman should be able to come in and grab them by their payas and schlep them out of purgatory, schlep them out of Gehenna." So he said a Breslov Chassid passes on, comes to heaven, and they say, "Nu, you were happy." And he says, "I can't say that I was happy." "You served God with passion." "I'm not sure." "You went to Uman." "I went to Uman, but it wasn't the real thing." "So what did you do?" Shrugs his shoulders. "No, you don't belong in paradise, you belong in purgatory." And when he starts feeling the heat of the grand barbecue, he starts screaming, "Rebbe, Abba," as they scream, "Father, Father." And Reb Nachman hears the scream, he comes in, he sees the payas, he takes the payas, schleps him out of purgatory. And he brings him to a good place. The Talmud says, then you have a Lubavitch, a Chabad Chassid. Also his time comes, he comes to heaven. They say, "Nu, you were the way you were supposed to be." Shrugs his shoulders. "You learned." "I tried to learn a little bit, but it wasn't very successful." "You davened." "I don't know what that means." "You were connected to the Rebbe." "That's called connected." I wanted to be connected." "Go to hell." So him and the Breslov both end up in purgatory. He starts filling the barbecue. So he also starts screaming, "Rebbe." The Talmud says, so the Rebbe appears and sees his chassid there. The Rebbe takes out $1, gives it to him, says, "Hatzlacha in your shlichus right here." But it's not just an anecdote. The holy Degel Machane Ephraim was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And he writes a beautiful, beautiful insight. What was the first revelation that Hashem has, that Moshe Rabbeinu has? He's in front of a burning bush. And he sees the bush that's burning. And what does he say? "Asurana ve'eres amara hagad lazeh." So Rashi, "Asura mikan li'искarav l'sham." Let me leave my place and go there to appreciate this great sight of a bush that burns and is not consumed. And he hears a voice. And what does the voice say? "Al tikrav haloim." Don't move. "Shal na'alecha me'araglecha." Take your shoes off your feet. Why? "Ki ha'makayim asher ta'omed alav admas kodesh." Because the place upon which you stand is sacred soil. Says the Degel Machane Ephraim, people see a burning bush from far. They see a fire, and they imagine that this is the fire they're looking for. This is the celebration of Yiddishkeit they're craving for. This is the nitzutz, this is the spark they're pining for. And they want to come close. And the voice tells them, Al tikrav haloim, don't move. Take your shoes off your feet. Ki hamakim ashata oimed elav admas kodesh. Don't think that you're going to find holiness by being another person and being in another life or being in another place. You have to realize that in the place where you're standing, the person who you are capable of finding the Kedusha within yourself. Think a moment about the name that the Alter Rebbe gave his magnum opus, his great book. We call it Tanya, but that wasn't the name he gave it. The name he gave it was Sefer Shel Beinanim. Those three words captures this entire message. Sefer Shel Beinanim means the book for the ordinary person. Not Sefer Shel Tzadikim, but also not Sefer Shel Rishayim. Sefer Shel Beinanim for the ordinary person. Because the Alter Rebbe believed that the ordinary person, you, the way you are capable of heights and of depths that may be unimaginable to you. As long as you can understand this truth, that holiness is not reserved for the person who transforms himself. Holiness is reserved for the place where you are standing. This theme immediately introduces a second theme. This first theme, namely, that the Tanya, more than empathizing, challenges because of its belief in the human being, brings us to another point which may seem a little paradoxical, but is really an expression of it. Namely, thank you. That means I should also say another l'chaim, l'chaim, l'chaim. Till the Tanya, most books of Jewish ethics, of Musar, had two personalities. They divided the Jews into two personalities. There was the tzaddik, and there was the antithesis of the tzaddik. The tzaddik is the righteous person, and then there's somebody who's not a tzaddik. What makes someone a tzaddik? A tzaddik is someone who identifies with Ratzon Hashem, with the will of Hashem Yisbarach, internally, externally, and continuously. Somebody who's holy within and without, he is the tzaddik. These were the two categories. You're a tzaddik or you're not a tzaddik. Either you're in or you're out. Either you're in the game or you're out of the game. The Alter Rebbe said, I'm writing a different book. Sefer Shel Beinanim. What was this category that he suddenly became overwhelmingly infatuated with, or that's a wrong word, that he became so connected to? Who is this Beinani? You see, this is a critical idea, especially today as we try to educate our children. The division of Klal Yisrael between Tzaddikim and Rishayim created a major problem. And the problem was this: very few people can be Tzaddikim. Very few people can become completely divine, inside and outside consistently. And the remainder of the people looked at the tzaddik and did one of two things. Either they despaired, they gave up, or they became fake. Either they gave up on themselves. They said, let me be honest to me, it's not me. I have no real place in Avodas Hashem. I'm just not this perfect saint. Or, if they didn't even have the courage for that, they start living a false life. This is a struggle that many youngsters have in yeshiva and school. The child, the teenager is learning about great people, great personalities. I'm sure some of us had this at the age of 16 and he decides, you know what, I'm going to be a Rabbi Akiva. If not the first Rabbi Akiva, I'll be a Rabbi Akiva Eger at least. I will be. He's 16. He may be sitting at a Fabrengen, he may be reading a book, he may hear a shir, and he gets inspired. He says, I'm going to become, in the Chabad world, a Rabbi Hillel Paritcher, who was one of the great Chassidim, a Rabbi Isaac Hummeler, a Rabbi Yitzchak Masmit, or I'm going to become back in the early days of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And for 3 days in his imagination, he's a shtickle Rabbi Akiva. But then one day, this same boy walks down the street and he sees a sight and he has a reaction and suddenly he realizes he's not Rabbi Akiva Eger, he's not the Pnei Yeshua, and he's not Rabbi Hillel Paritcher. And what does he do with that? He can do one of two things. Either he gives up on himself. I don't belong to this class. If I don't belong to this class, let me at least make it in a different world where I can succeed. Or another one comes to the conclusion, I could never ever be honest again. I have to appear to be somebody, and deep down he knows it's not him, and he becomes a very unhealthy person, a dysfunctional person. And it expresses itself in marriage, and it expresses itself the way he raises his children or she raises her children. This was one of the great revolutions of Sefer Shel Beinanim. What the Alter Rebbe accompanied with the Sefer Shel Beinanim, he said, you're not a tzaddik, nor were you ever supposed to be a tzaddik, nor does God want you to be a tzaddik, nor are you capable of being a tzaddik because he's not interested in you as a tzaddik. He doesn't want you touching and melting away in the burning bush. The way you are here today, with your struggles, with your fragmentation, with your inner dichotomy, with your roller coaster of emotions, the way you are gazing at the mirror in the most honest and genuine way, it's here where you are empowered to connect to your soul and to connect to God, not by transforming every facet of your character, which you will not be able to, but rather identifying who you are honestly and realizing, in the Alter Rebbe's words, that your function is not necessarily always to transform, but often to subjugate. Not always to metamorphosize, but often to confront. Not always to revolutionize, but often to face and subdue. And it is within your character and your identity, Sulam Mutzav Arzo, the place where you're standing, you can find a real relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. And with that, the Alter Rebbe gave millions of Jews the ability to become Oivdei Hashem Be'emes, to become servants of Hashem truthfully, by being completely honest with who they are. Sefer Shel Beinanim, it's the book for the ordinary individual. He didn't want, in the words of the Rebbe, he did not want holy people doing holy things. Sometimes Hashem wants unholy people doing holy things. You're unholy, that's fine. It's perfect. As long as you can identify it and know what your mission is with this unholiness. You sometimes look at yourself, you're in Gehenna. You have a shlichus. The Beinani is supposed to be a Beinani. He's not supposed to be a tzaddik. There was another major contribution that the Alter Rebbe gave us, the Baal Shem Tov and his students and his disciples gave us, and the Alter Rebbe emphasized so emphatically again and again. And interestingly, this too was in the dream of Yaakov Avinu. Sometimes one dream contains a lot. What happens during that dream? Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He takes from the stones around him, and he surrounds himself. But when he wakes up, vayikaches ha'evan, he takes one stone. So what do the Chazal say, Rashi brings? That he surrounded himself with many stones. And what happened? The stones thought they're surrounding a tzaddik. They were like, board members in a shul. I mean, not this shul, but a shul. And they started to fight. And what was the fight? Alaya nich tzaddik es reishi, alaya nich tzaddik es reishi, right? Everyone says, I want the head of the tzaddik. I want the head of the tzaddik. Why should I be by the feet? Why should I be by the hands? I want his head. So what did Hashem do? He made a miracle. What did he do? He took all the stones and he congealed them into one stone. So now there's one large stone. So the Rebbe once asked a simple question, what the Rebbe used to call a klotz kasha. You know what a klotz kasha is? How do you translate a klotz kasha? A klotz is a piece of wood. A klotz kasha means, they say a kasha that a klotz asks, but usually they're the best questions. Because the smart people are scared to ask the good questions. Every Mitzvah Shabbos on the radio, there would be Rabbi Weinberg is also saying gesund. Rabbi Yosef Weinberg would give over from the Sichos of Shabbos in the Tanya. And when he was out of town, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas Katz, all of Hashalom, would give over on the radio the Sicha of Shabbos. So one Mitzvah Shabbos, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas Katz of blessed memory gets up and says, Unheint hat der Rebbe gefragt eine von seiner bewusste Klotzkashas. And today, the Rebbe asked one of his famous Klotzkashas, because the Rebbe would often say as a Klotzkasha. That's how he introduced it on the radio. It was very charming. Eine von seiner bewusste Klotzkashas. So the Rebbe asked a klotz kasha. He says, I don't understand. Even if 10 stones become one rock, only one part of the rock can be under Yaakov's head. So how did it solve the problem? And the Rebbe's answer was, the only reason you mind that somebody else has the head is because you're not one with that person. But if you would understand the organic oneness, then you wouldn't mind if somebody else has the head, because when you have the head, it's as though I have the head, because you and me are one. They tell the anecdote about a Rebbe, some master who was sitting on a chair, and it was a very comfortable chair. And of course, in the chair, on what he was sitting, there were little holes. There were little holes to let in air and make it even more comfortable. And the tzaddik was sitting on one particular hole. So all the holes started to fight. Every hole said, I want the tzaddik to sit on me. So they decided they're all going to become one big hole. And he fell right through it. Often, people preach unity. Let us be one big hole, and he falls right through it. But that has nothing to do with Chassidus. That has to do with egotism or bitterness or a combination of both. The Alter Rebbe taught and entrenched in Chassidim what they called haben a Geschmack in Teuvet Tanayidin. To realize that the greatest thing a person can do in the world is develop a taste to do a favor to another Jew. I'll never forget that Shabbos Farbrengen when the Rebbe quoted the statement of the Baal Shem Tov, that a soul comes down for 70, 80 years just to do one favor to a Jew materially or spiritually. And the Rebbe said, a pisgam mavhil, those were his words. It's a shocking statement of the Baal Shem Tov. Here is a Jew who put on tefillin, who learned Torah, who did mezuzah, who ate kosher, and who did 612 mitzvahs, or all the mitzvahs that we can do nowadays. And he did them well. And the Baal Shem Tov says that all of this was only a preparation for what? Not even for himself. that someone needs a favor. And what type of favor? He needs a physical favor. He's going through a hard time. And his soul comes down just to do one favor to this person in materialism or in spirituality. But this was what the Baal Shem Tov taught. And what the Alter Rebbe wanted Chassidim to feel. That the greatest fortune in life is when you can be there for another person. And this idea of the Alter Rebbe is so desperately needed because people are looking for solutions for different problems, whether in this area or that area, especially in the area of education. And we often fail to realize the obvious. If you can be there for a person for real, you will solve most of the problems. If a student, if a child, if a young man or a young woman, if a young husband or a couple or a wife feel that somebody really cares without judgmentalism, without superiority, then you can create miracles with every person. But for this, we have to feel like one stone, one rock. I should be able to celebrate with you. I should be able to empathize with you. And for some, it's a forgotten concept. They forgot the idea of simply doing a gesture, saying a varem avort, a warm idea, a warm word to another person, to strengthen them. It was one Shabbos Chanukah. I want to say two things and I don't know what to say first. I have to go to therapy for that. But I'll say one. It was one Shabbos Chanukah, Tovshin Lamed Daled, 1973, a little while after the Yom Kippur War. There was a big Pegisha, there was a convention of students from campuses that came to Brooklyn that Shabbos. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe was speaking. And he said a gewaldige word, you can mamish live with this word your whole life. It's Yesod HaChassidus, it's the foundation of Chassidus. He said, look at this story. No one realizes the detail of Chumash, of Vayeshev. Everyone discusses the big story. No one discusses the small aspect of the narrative. And that is, Yosef becomes the prime minister and he saves the whole world from hunger because Pari appoints him as his Mishnah Lamelech, as his viceroy, and as a result, Yosef saves the world from famine. He knows that the 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. The whole story everybody knows. But how did Yosef get that position? Everybody knows. Pari had a dream and he needed somebody to interpret the dreams. Why'd they bring Yosef? Everybody knows because the butler of Pari had Yosef explain and decipher his dreams. So he was impressed. He told Pari 2 years later, there's a guy who knows how to interpret dreams. But how did Yosef come to interpret the butler's dream? The Torah says exactly. What happened? It was one morning in a dungeon. And Yosef looked at a butler and a baker. V'hinam zoyafim. They were depressed. They looked downtrodden. And what did he do? He went over to them and he asked them a question. 4 words. Madua pneichem royim hayom. Why do you look down today? Why aren't you happy? At first glance, it's a very strange thing, the Rebbe said. What do you mean, why are they depressed? What, are they eating sushi at a bar mitzvah? What, are they eating turkey and cranberry sauce at a Yud Tes Kislev Thanksgiving dinner? In Detroit? In Oak Park? They're in a dungeon in Egypt on death row, for heaven's sake. The baker would be executed in 3 days. What should he be doing? Dancing Kazatskis? Of course he's depressed. Madua pneichem royim hayom. And generally, what type of question is that? Whoever heard of such a question in Torah? Why did Yosef ask the question? They were his brothers. They were his friends. They were 2 ministers of Paro. They were not Jewish. They worked for Paro. They were anti-Semites. What would your grandmother say if she would see them depressed? She would say, okay, alavai avala. Madua pneichem royim hayom. Well, they're not allowed to be depressed. What are they, dogs in California? If they look sour, you have to bring them immediately to a psychoanalyst. So they're depressed. They'll get over it. No, it's a story. He asks them. And what about he himself? If there was any man who should have been depressed, it was he. Usually when you're asking somebody, why are you unhappy, it underscores the fact that you're in a good place. Because when you're depressed, you usually don't have the mental space to ask other people why they're unhappy. What about Yosef himself? Why was he happy? If you would give a psychoanalyst a resume of Yosef's life, what do you think the diagnosis would be? 9 years old, his mother died. 17 years old, his brothers kidnapped him, plunged him into a pit, and then sold him into slavery. He ends up as a successful slave, is accused of abuse and immorality, and plunged into a dungeon in Egypt for life. Egypt was not a democracy. It's still a shady democracy. Yosef yet seems to be completely in joy. And when he sees two Egyptians not happy, Madua pneichem royim ayoyim. And the Rebbe said, here you see what a Yid is. That since Yosef knew that God is everywhere, it means every experience in life has meaning. And that means one ought to always have a positive and a happy experience of life, because Yosef understood that God is everywhere. And when he saw two non-Jews who were depressed, he felt it's not fear, because to live means to be happy. Today we live in a culture where people feel they have to be miserable. If you see somebody who looks too happy, you want to know what he's taking. What are you on? You happy? If somebody comes into Shul, tzahak, tzakrochen, tzashlavet, oh, Baruch Hashem, thank God. But if somebody is chas v'shalom, happy, lebedik, pskein atensel, something wrong. You have to be institutionalized. Because we live in a culture where you're supposed to be miserable. If teenagers are in a bad mood, we're all happy. They're supposed to be in a bad mood. God forbid if your teenager is in a good mood, what's going on? You must be a terrible mother. You must be so dysfunctional that your teenagers are so repressed, they don't even know how miserable they are. I'm sure you're a horrible mother. But this is a mistake. You know the Maisa, a few years ago when the Israeli economy was very dire, so there was a group of Knesset members who met. What can they do to help the Israeli economy? So somebody suggested to learn from Germany and Japan. After the Second World War, what happened? America destroyed them during the war, and then America built them into economic superpowers. So the Israeli Knesset member said, let's declare war against the United States. America will destroy us, and then we'll become an economic superpower. One Knesset member gets up and says, there's one problem. Hakol tov v'yafeh, it's all nice. But one shaila, one question. What happens if we win the war? We have problems winning. We have problems winning. Israel won a war in 1967, and they still can't forgive themselves for winning. If they would have lost the war, it would have been beautiful. Baruch Hashem, we lost. Let's go cry and say Tehillim. It works perfect. Jews are supposed to lose. But this is part of the galus that became part of the Jewish people. A mentality of you have to lose. You have to be miserable. You have to be downtrodden. The Baal Shem Tov stopped saying Eicha and he started to sing Shir HaShirim. The Baal Shem Tov also cried about galus. The Alter Rebbe also cried about galus. Milanu Gadu from the Rebbe also cried about galus. But they started to say Shir HaShirim. Because they cried about galus, they wanted to bring the light of Mashiach into galus. And the light of Mashiach is a light of dignity. And it's a light of happiness. And it's a light in which the Jew doesn't have to be embarrassed that he or she has a message from God to the world. Somebody once said, you know who Jews are today? A Jew makes a fist. Israel makes a fist. Wow, Jews are making a fist. And what's the next step? Ashamnu, bagadnu, gazalnu, al chet shechatonu. I'm sorry for existing. Another person from a different culture makes a fist, afterwards go check your nose by the doctor. But the Jew makes a fist, then he's confessing for the rest of his life that he survived. Yosef had a very different approach. Yosef believed not only in his right to be happy, he believed that everyone is supposed to be happy. Even a prisoner, and when he sees two non-Jewish prisoners who are unhappy, he says, Madua pneichem royim ayoyim. So you might think Yosef was a nice man. Comes the Torah and says, no. As a result of that question, why do you look down today? What happens? Ultimately, it spirals, a domino effect to the extent that Yosef becomes the prime minister of the superpower of the time and saves the world from famine. So the salvation of the entire world from a devastating famine in the imagination of the Tanakh can be traced back to what? To one simple good morning addressed to two depressed people, looking them in their eyes and saying, Madua pneichem royim hayom. When I meet somebody in the morning, I meet a child, an adult, a teenager, a man, a woman, a friend, not a friend, and I see that they're sour. They look dejected. And I put my hand on their shoulder and I say, tell me what is going on in your life. Give me a hug. Let me give you a hug. You may view it as a very nice gesture, but quite insignificant and inconsequential. Comes the Torah and says that question in a prison to two people is ultimately what allows Yosef to save the whole world. The world was saved, not from a big cataclysmic event, but it was saved from one good morning by one person to two individuals, not even of his people. And it's this foundation that is so often forgotten. Not always does one has to search for extraordinary tricks and schemes to bring people closer. Be nice. Be warm. Be kind. Don't be stingy of a hug, to give a hug. Don't be stingy to be passionate. Don't be stingy to tell somebody you care for them. Don't be stingy with the words, I love you. Be there for somebody else genuinely. Develop a geschmack in Toivet Tanayidin. A geschmack to do somebody else a favor. To help somebody out. A piece of advice, a good word, a gesture, a loan, whatever it may be. And the effects of this and the ramifications of this are unimaginable. This was the foundation that Alter Rebbe taught. A geschmack in Toivet Tanayidin. The Rebbe Rayatz, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, describes how one day his father, the Rashab, took a walk with him. And during the walk, he described to him the tremendous value in putting on talis and tefillin. And before you start davening, you should think Chassidus. And the Rashab said somebody who puts on talis and tefillin, and before they start praying, they take a few minutes and they think through in their mind a concept, an idea of Chassidus in an internalized and personal way. He said it accomplishes 10 major achievements, and he went through all the 10. It illuminates and brings out the soul. It refines the animal soul. It trains the brain. It transforms a person's life. It puts a person in the domain of God. 10 things. And then the Rashab continued. But all these 10 things that you achieve through learning and thinking Chassidus and talis and tefillin before davening, kommt es nicht. It pales in comparison to the greatness when somebody is given a gift by God. Zu haben a chush und a geschmack in Toivet Tanayidin. When somebody is given a gift from God, to have a feeling and a geschmack to do a favor to another Jew, this transcends all of the greatest spiritual achievements of self-refinement. You know, sometimes I look at different, I'm involved in education a little bit, not as much as I would like, but a little bit. And sometimes there are people who are written off because they're not successful within a certain cookie cutter structure and model. But I often see that kid has a geschmack in Toivet Tanayidin. That kid has a sensitivity, loves doing a favor to somebody. And I asked the principal, I said, here, look at this letter of the Rebbe, look at this sikha, this discourse of the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe. who probably understood a little bit about religion as much as you. And he heard from his father that the 10 tremendous levels of spiritual refinement don't come close to somebody who has a feeling to do somebody else a favor. So now you tell me who's greater than who. You tell me who's greater than who. I have a congregant of mine who told me a story that he himself observed. I know there's a few people in this room who will appreciate the story more than others because they knew him. But if you knew him or not, it's a very powerful story. There was an old Chassid who lived in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. His name was Reb Zalman Teibel. Reb Zalman Teibel he was a young man, and then as usual happens, young people become a little older. And he became an elderly Jew. He was not married. And he would eat meals on the second floor of 770 in the house of the sixth of the Rebbe Rayatz, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe. He had a relationship with the Rebbe. And I remember him already as an older man. He would walk the streets, and then he either had dementia or Alzheimer's, became senile, and he couldn't function anymore himself. So he was in an old age home in Williamsburg called Eshel Avraham, which is a home for the aging, where they put him. And he didn't recognize people anymore. He didn't have family. I mean, he had relatives, but no immediate family. So he didn't have many visitors. He was there in the old age home, and they took care of him. And after years, he lived to his deep 90s. He already recognized nobody. He was completely senile. One year, Erev Yom Kippur, a few hours before Yom Kippur, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe had a custom. He would give lekach, he would give honey cake to anyone who wanted to take a piece of lekach with a blessing for Hashana Tova Mesukah. So the nurse or the attendant of Reb Zalman Teibel knew how many years Reb Zalman Teibel was by the Rebbe, and they had a very close relationship. So he decided it would be worthwhile to bring Reb Zalman to get a blessing from the Rebbe before Yom Kippur for the next year. So they took him in a wheelchair and they brought him to 770, and they brought him to the Rebbe, but he was completely senile. So they took him out of the wheelchair, they schlepped him, and two people were holding him, and they brought him to the door. And the Rebbe looked. This was very, very close to Yom Kippur, and he saw Zalman Teibel. Now, Reb Zalman Teibel brought a niggin to Lubavitch. You know which niggin? He brought a melody to Lubavitch, and it's the melody of Ano Avda de Kutchabricha. That melody was brought to Chabad by Reb Zalman Teibel in the 1960s. So Reb Zalman is standing there, and the Rebbe takes the honey cake, and he looks at Reb Zalman, but there's no response. Now the person who shared the story with me, who davens in my shul, was standing right behind Zalman Teibel, so he saw it. So the Rebbe takes the cake and starts waving it in front of his eyes because he wanted to get his attention. But Reb Zalman was not there. He was completely senile. I mean, there was no distinction where he was standing. He was just not present mentally. And the line was huge. It would go down Eastern Parkway till Brooklyn. So the Rebbe put down the cake and started to sing to Reb Zalman Teibel. Ano, avda de kodesh aberichu. And Nosson tells me he's standing there. Zalman Teibel is by the door. The Rebbe is in front of the door, and he's singing a song solo to Zalman Teibel. Ano, avda de kodesh aberichu. Ano, avda de kodesh aberichu. The sagidina come, yomekame de kare raise. And the Rebbe continues, Umekame, mekame de kare raise, bechol idon vidon. And after a while of singing, suddenly Zalman Teibel wakes up for a moment, and he looks at the Rebbe, and he realized that he's standing in front of the Rebbe, and his face fills up with a huge radiant smile. And the moment the Rebbe saw he was there, present, he gave him the cake, he gave him a blessing, and Reb Zalman Teibel retreated back into a space and moved on. And the line went on. I thought to myself, some of us go to old age homes. Some of us have relatives in old age homes. You know the usual conception of society towards a man who's 90, who's 95, who's 98. He was very, very old. And this was Erev Yom Kippur with hundreds or thousands of people waiting on the line. But by the Rebbe, what it was important was to stop the entire line and to sing his song that he brought many, many years ago, knowing that through this song he might be able to reach a space in his psyche. And he brought Reb Zalman Teibel back even for a few moments, and he gave him that sense of dignity and that sense of happiness and that sense of wholesomeness that once again he was standing in front of his Rebbe. Chassid Lifnei Rabbi, he was a Chassid standing in front of his Rebbe a few hours before Kol Nidre of the Yom HaKadosh, and then he can have another Yom Kippur and the Rebbe can have another Yom Kippur. And every person in their own way and in their own corner ought to think about life in this fashion. When I wake up in the morning, before I go to sleep at night, who can I touch and how can I touch them? And if I just think this way, you will see miracles happening as a result of your thoughtfulness. I'm sometimes shocked. A person came to me the other day and he said, I want to tell you that 15 years ago, you met me in this and this place, and you told me something about myself, a positive thing, and I want to thank you because as a result of that, I found the courage to do so, and that's why I am here where I am. I don't remember that I said it. I don't remember why I said it. I didn't know who the person's name was. But then I realized, why are people not obsessed with being nice to other people and saying nice things to them and being warm to them? And they don't realize the repercussions, especially when it's to a young person who may be shaking. And this Alter Rebbe did not stop teaching with Chassidus that we have to see each other as one rock, and not as a rock in the sense of a rock feels no pain, but a rock in the sense that we are all part of one powerful entity. And if you have the head, I shouldn't mind, because your celebration is ultimately my celebration, and for me to win, you also have to win. It's just as in a marriage. When a husband thinks that he can win and his wife can lose, he's simply a little primitive and doesn't understand that for him to win, she also has to win. And if one of the spouses is losing, then the other one ultimately lost as well. Finally, there is one third contribution that I want to share of what Chassidus gave the Jewish world in such a powerful way. And here I share with you an interpretation, a beautiful interpretation of a sefer called the Bas Ayin. Bas Ayin is a Chassidic work authored by a man named Rabbi Avram of Avruch in the generation of the Alter Rebbe, a little bit after. And on Parshas Vayeshev, he presents a powerful interpretation which I want to share with you. He quotes the story of Vayeshev, of Yehuda and Tamar. Everybody knows the story. Yehuda's son Er marries Tamar, dies childless. Tamar marries the second son Einan, who dies childless. According to Yibum, levirate marriages, Tamar ought to marry the third son Shelah. Yehuda is afraid. He thinks that she's guilty in the death of his two sons. Tamar is desperate. She can't marry another husband because she's bound up to Shelah. She's not marrying Shelah because Yehuda says you have to wait. He doesn't want to give her to Shelah. What do? So the Ramban explains that before Matan Torah, Yibum was not only to a brother-in-law, it was also to any member of the family, including a father-in-law. So Tamar creates a situation and she engages in a contact and a relationship with Yehuda. She becomes pregnant. Yehuda hears that Tamar became pregnant from who? Not from Shelah, from somebody else. So he gives the verdict to Tziyu of Isisarav, she should be burnt, and on the way out, she sends the famous message to Yehuda, Haker no! Recognize Tamar was a clever woman. Before she engaged in relation with Yehuda, she took collateral for him. What did she take? HaChoisemes, she took his seal. Mata, she took his stick. Psil, she took his cord. Haker now recognize who these items belong to. He is the man who impregnated me. Vayaker Yehuda, vayoymet sotka, she's right, me many. It was me, ki al kein lo nesatil l'sheila b'ni, she's right, because I didn't give her to Sheila, my son. Says the Helike Bas Ayin, listen, Aboisa. Yehuda contains the names of Hashem. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. The Gemara says Yehuda Nikra al Shmai Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yehuda represents God. Tamar is a metaphor for the Jewish people. Tzaddik, Katomar, Yifrach, Ke'erez, Balavan, and Yizga. The tzaddik blossoms like a tamar, like a palm tree. The Gemara says in Sukkah, why do we use a lulav on Sukkah from a frond of a palm tree? Because Yesh Lo Leiv Echad, it has one heart, Lavinu Shabashamayim, representing the one heart of the Jews to our Father in heaven. So Yehuda is a metaphor for Hashem, and Tamar is a metaphor for the Jewish people. Yehuda and Tamar are deeply connected. What happens? Vayihikim Shloish Chadashim. The Chumash says that Tamar and Yehuda engage in a relationship. 3 months later, they come to Yehuda and they say, Zansa Tamar Kalasacha, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, engaged in harlotry, in a promiscuous relationship. Says the Basayin, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, every Jew becomes one with Hashem. Every Jew does tshuva, every Jew becomes inspired. We go to Shul, we daven. We connect, we do tshuva. Around 3 months later, it doesn't say 3 months, around 3 months. When is around 3 months later? Time of Chanukah. Go Tishrei, Cheshvan, most of Kislev, it's almost 3 months. It says in Kabbalah that the days of Chanukah is Gemar Hadin, that's the end of the judgment of Tishrei. You know, Jewish court, everything is delayed. So you have Rosh Hashanah, Seis Mitzvah, Yom Kippur, Shana Rabbah, but really it's Chanukah. No, that you made up. In Kabbalah, it ends up Chanukah. So 3 months later, they're finishing the verdict. The 8 days of Chanukah correspond to the 8 days of Sukkot. 3 months later, Vayagid lo Yehuda, the message comes to God. Vayomer, they say, Zon Satama Kalasecha. Your beautiful Kala, your beautiful bride, your beautiful daughter-in-law Tamar, that date, that palm tree that has one heart, that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur was screaming. That soul that was shouting, V'yeda kol pol ki ata palti, v'yoven kol yitzur ki ata yitzarti, v'yomer kol asher neshama v'api Hashem Elokei Yisrael melech u'malchusai b'koil mashallah. That Jew whose heart was aroused when the shofar was blown and whose soul melted in ecstasy when he or she screamed, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim, l'shana ba b'Yerushalayim. 3 months later, winter comes, Thanksgiving comes, and look how he digs into a piece of turkey. Suddenly he forgot the Adam Yisoide me'afar v'soifel afar. Suddenly the winter months came, he forgot Rosh Hashanah, he forgot Yom Kippur, he forgot Sukkot, he forgot Simchas Torah. He becomes completely entrenched in his own materialistic and narcissistic needs. He becomes completely alienated from God and spirituality. He becomes apathetic and indifferent. Zansa Tamar Kalasecha. Tamar went to another man. V'gamine haral is nunim. She's pregnant. Sometimes a person fal durach, every person stumbles, every person makes a mistake. But she not only made a mistake, she became haral is nunim. She's having a child from the other husband. She's building a home with the other man. It's not just the Jew stumbled. The Jew has another life. He has a new identity. He's completely not interested in you. He's not interested in your relationship. He went to somebody else. She went to somebody else. Yehuda says, if this is the case, it comes the din on Hanukkah. He says, so what do I need the Jew for? The whole purpose of creating the Jewish people is that they become ambassadors of the divine in this world. The moment he becomes entrenched in the world, what do I need the Jew? It's similar to what happens on Purim. If their entire value in their own eyes is that Achashverosh accepts them and invites them to the White House of Shushan to engage in the Purim in the White House of Shushan, the Persian sushi party, and even if it's kosher, if that becomes their identity, Nenu misudase, what do I need? He mutzes. Tamar is being taken out to the fulfillment of the verdict that was given on the time of Hanukkah because of the lack of inspiration of the Jew. And on the way, V'hi sholcha el chamia lemer, the Jew Tamar sends a message to Yehuda. And she sends 3 items to him. And what are the 3 items? Chaisemes, psilim, and mata. A seal. A psil is a cord, a mata is a stick. And she tells you, the hacker no. Look into these 3 items and you tell me who do they belong to. Whoever they belong to, this is the man with whom I'm having a child. Says the Basai, and it comes Hanukkah. Every Jew takes a menorah and kindles a flame. And Tamar sends 3 items to Hashem and says, Hakerno, Lemi HaChaisemes. Who does the seal belong to? A menorah is made up, the first thing we have oil. The oil represents the Pach Echot Shel Shem, and the Gemara in Shabbos, Shoyach Chasum B'Chaisamer Shel Kohen Gadol, the jug of oil that was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol. The oil that we put in the menorah is a reflection and a continuum of that oil that had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, which stayed lit for 8 days in the Beis HaMikdash. V'hapsilim. Psil in Hebrew means a psila, is a wick. There's oil and there's a wick. And then v'hamat. Zog the Basayin, hamat is the gematria of keli, vessel, which is the menorah itself. You have the vessel, the candelabra, you have the oil, and you have the wick. Or you can add v'hamat is the stick, the staff. Tamar sends a message to Yehuda and says, look at the Chanukah menorah. And now look at the mata, look at the wandering stick that the Jewish people have taken into their hands, generation after generation, locating from one place to another place, from one country to another country, only because they were Jews. You want to know who I'm pregnant with? You want to know who I'm having a child with? I'm having a child with the person who owns these items. Haker no, Tamar, says Yehuda. Who I belong to, whom I'm really married to, who I want to build a family with, whom I want to have children with. Haker no, recognize. Why did the Jews fight the Syrian Greeks to a point of complete self-sacrifice? Why did Hannah and her 7 children stand up to Antiochus? Why did Matisyahu and his children and the guerrilla war of the Hashmonaim stand up to a prevailing, dominant, aesthetic, Greek powerful culture that threatened to dominate the entire world with the power of Greek philosophy and aestheticism? Look at this light of the menorah, look at the oil, look at the wick, look at the candelabra, and look at this wandering staff. And you tell me, who the Jews are really committed to, who the Jews are really loyal to. Yehuda looks at the menorah and he recognizes it, and he says, Tzadka. She's right. I'm wrong. Me many. These children are for me. Because I didn't give her to Sheila, my son. Says the Basayin Yaakov Avinu tells Yehuda in Parshas Vayechi. What does he tell Yehuda? Lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda mechokik me bein raglav ad ki yaver shile v'lo yikas hamim. The scepter will not depart from Yehuda, from Judah, nor will the ruler leave his feet In other words, royalty belongs to the tribe of Judah. Ad ki yaveh Shiloi, till Shiloi comes. What does Rashi say? Who's Shiloi? So Rashi, Shiloi zeh hamelech haMashiach. Shiloi represents Mashiach. Says Hashem, ki al kein lo nesati l'shei lebni. Tzadka, Tamar is right. Me many, she has a child from me. Ki al kein lo nesati l'shei lebni. 3 months later, I see so many Jews are alienated, they're uninspired, they're apathetic. I'm guilty. Ki al kein lo nesati l'shei lebni. Because I refuse to bring them Mashiach. I refuse to introduce them to Sheila, my son. What can you expect of a wife whom you disappeared from 2,000 years, more than 2,000 years? So you expect that she should never look away. You expect she should never stumble. You should expect that she should never have a downer. What do you want from this person? In the famous story of the Maggid whose yahrzeit is tonight, Yud Tes Kislev, that his son Rabbi Avram Amalach, Rabbi Avram the angel, came to him crying as a child, and he said, "Why are you crying?" And he said, "I was playing hide and seek with my friends." "So why are you crying?" He says, "I hid and my friends couldn't find me." So his father says, "So you won the game. It's great, they can't find you, you won." He says, "No, they stopped searching." So the Maggid said, this is the story of life. God concealed himself so that the child should search for him, but he hid himself so well that the child often stopped searching. Wifel is Ashir, how long can he search? Sonntag gesucht, Montag gesucht, Dienstag gesucht, Sunday he searched, and Monday he searched, and Tuesday he searched. How long can he search for? If anybody is to blame, then I am to blame. And this too was the great gift of Chassidus, to be able to look at a Jew, that we should be able to look at ourselves and appreciate within ourselves and within another Jew that leish asher eile lo yanochi hara, that the lack of inspiration and his oirus is ultimately superficial. It's ultimately skin deep. When you have a long gullus, people stop searching for God. When he's so concealed, people stop searching for Hashem. When he's hidden so well, it's very hard for people to continue looking. And Chassidus came to reveal what a Jew really is, what a Jew is truly searching for, what a Jew is really connected to, and said that everything else ultimately is very superficial and shallow, and the moment there'll be the nesatiya l'sheila b'ni, the moment you can see the sheila in a Jew, as the Moir Einayim writes that there's a spark of Mashiach in every person, then that moment you'll recognize how loyal Tamar is and how connected Tamar is. This then, my friends, are 3 or 4 of the major gifts for which we have our thanksgiving tonight. And we say, Ashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, to teach us how the ladder that's standing on the earth is capable of reaching heaven, not just because it's lovable, but because its power and potential is awesome. To teach the power of Hamokim Mashata Oimei Dalav Admas Koideshu, where you stand, you can cultivate and find holiness. Ba'asher hu sham, as we read on Rosh Hashanah. Number 3, the consciousness of one stone. The feeling of kulanu b'nei ish echad, that we're one person. The geschmack, the fortune in life when you realize that the greatest thing your soul can do is to develop a love, to do a favor to another person, to emulate Yosef and ask the 4 words, why do you look down today? How can I be here for you? And finally, number 4, the ability to be able to look at yourself and another Jew and God and say, Li'ish asher eile lo anochi hara, that the holiness of Jews is gewalt, is unbelievable. The greatness of the Jewish people is awesome. It's powerful. That after 2,000 years, they stumbled only as much as they stumbled. That's the miracle. I'll conclude. Somebody once asked a question of a colleague of mine. He was talking about Mashiach, and he said, why do you say we want Mashiach now? You realize when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a major Yom Hadin, there's going to be a major day of judgment. It's not going to be fun. Maybe better not to ask for Mashiach. He said, you know what you remind me of? A husband leaves for work, and the wife knows 7 o'clock he comes home, and she's a good wife. The old style she has, the food waiting on the table with a plastic over the plate to retain the heat. And she's not on the phone. And she holds the 2 Crocs as he comes into the door so he could get into the Crocs right away. I mean, today it's a different minhag. But they're talking about, other times, other days. And he comes into a hot soup and he starts eating. And one night at 7 o'clock, and the soup is waiting, and the soup is hot, and it's deliciously hot, and the husband doesn't come home. And she texts him, and he doesn't answer. It's 8 and 9 and 10 and 11, he's not home. She gets worried, he's not home. He'll come home at night, late at night, he's not home. The next day, he's still not home. She searches and searches, days pass, and he's gone, he's lost. Months pass, no trace of him. Years pass, and people come to her and say, you don't have a husband anymore. He forgot about you. It's time for you to move on. Why do you still have the bowl of soup on the table? She says, he's going to come back. He told me he's going to come back. He's going to come back. Years and years pass. And intelligent people are saying, Shuvi, Shuvi, Hashulamis. You're putting your hopes on straw. He's not coming back. Go somewhere else and get rid of the soup. But she tenaciously keeps the soup there. It takes 2,000 years. And the husband comes back. And the first thing is he goes over to the soup. And he takes the spoon and he tastes the soup. What do you think is the first word he's going to tell his wife? You think he's going to say, why is the soup cold? Or he's going to say, wow. Wow. What a soup. 2,000 years and you still kept the soup waiting for me on the table. That's what he's going to say. If Mashiach would have come 50 years later, 100 years later, no. Now he's going to say, wow, you still kept the soup. Ki al kein lo nesatiya l'sheila b'ni. You didn't bring Sheila. Can you really expect anything else but to be in awe, to be in shock, to be stunned by the gadlus, by the holiness of mi cha'amcha Yisrael goyechad ba'aretz. When he sees this, once and for all he decides, I have to bring Sheila b'ni. Kein tiya lanu b'mheira b'yameinu mamish l'chayim, l'chayim, l'chayim.